Part 4. The air of the battlefield had a unique smell to it. It was a muddled mess of all kinds of odors, and simply put, it was a revolting stench. Still, it was a stench that one could get used to. One of the people behind the closed portcullis, Remedios, took several deep breaths of that stinking air. Her eyes were fixed on the advancing force before her, which numbered over 10,000. The leaders of the assault on this location were ogres and horse-like demi-humans. Remedios gripped her holy sword tightly. She liked using the sword to settle matters. She loved it. It clearly defined winners and losers. After all, there would be no more trouble after you killed the opposition. Life would have been so much easier if things were all so simple. Her sister, Kelit, and her master, Kalka, would no longer knit their brows. Ha! She sighed. After that, Remedios thought about what she had to do. Gustav had said a lot of hard-to-understand things just now, but the gist of it was that they could not let a single demi-human pass this gate. The demi-humans numbered in the tens of thousands. Around 10,000 of them were bearing down on the gate. Not letting a single one past would be impossible if we were fighting on the plains, but here I can use the gate to limit the numbers who can attack me. So as long as I can keep fighting, it'll be easy enough to keep him from getting past. I just need to keep drinking fatigue recovery potions and keep fighting them one-on-one. If Gustav were here and had heard this, the look on his face would probably say, "Are you fucking serious?" And as she calmly considered that mental image, Remedios laughed. Still, the idea was quite ridiculous, and it was no wonder he would often grab his head in frustration. "See how perfect my plan is. Kalka-sama said I could delegate command to someone else, and Caspon-sama seems like an excellent person." Remedios nodded. After that, Remedios thought about the only flaw in her plan to fight one-on-one 10,000 times. That was the existence of Jaldri. Remedios' plan broke down when it encountered someone stronger than her. She had trouble using her brain for the most part, but her mind was quite adept when it came to war. That was why she understood that it would be very difficult for her to defeat Jaldri. Of course, she could not admit that in front of her subordinates. She was the strongest paladin in the Holy Kingdom, and if she admitted her weakness, morale would probably plunge to rock bottom. That was why they had brought the Saucer King over. The Saucer King, huh? The fact that they had to entrust one of the undead with the fate of the nation upset her so much that she wanted to throw up. However, they had no other option. TCH. If only that undead creature had fought in a sneaky way, like using those goats or sheep which killed all those kingdom troops. That way, no innocents would have to be sacrificed. Don't the undead understand that people with strength have to protect the weak? Still, he's really strong, isn't he? Taking a city by oneself was an impressive feat. Busser was a famous demi-human, according to Gustav, and defeating him was also quite outstanding. However, Jaldri was a different matter altogether. She had her doubts as to whether even a magic caster who could conquer a city without assistance could actually defeat him. Perhaps she would have learned the truth if she could have crossed blades with him just once, but Gustav had desperately pleaded with her not to. Therefore, she did not know exactly how strong the Saucer King was. Remedios remained dubious of the Saucer King's strength. She had personally experienced Jaldabaoth's might when he had revealed his true nature, but she could not sense anything like that from the Saucer King. If he was truly able to crush the kingdom's army, then he ought to be surrounded in an aura of power that could not be hidden. Was that because he was a magic caster? However, if he was on Jaldabaoth's level, she ought to have been able to sense something from him. It would be good if he was really as strong as he claimed. Well, we won't lose much if he dies. That undead creature will be a thorn in the Holy Kingdom's side in the future. Ideally, the two of them would kill each other. Remedio's opinion had not changed even after her subordinates protested it. No, it had only solidified after the Saucer King killed the boy who had been taken hostage. As a paladin, she could not tolerate anyone who could calmly commit such inhuman acts. The people of that country were actually ruled by fear, right? When she thought about it, she found a lot of points which pointed to that conclusion. Perhaps having him and Jaldri kill each other would be for their good too. The problem is the people of our nation. Gustav was right when he said that this was a chance for us. We paladins can show our strength and abandon the Saucer King's foolish opinions. Still, if Jaldri shows up, we have to let him handle it. Remedios took off her helmet. She wanted to scratch her head. It was hard to imagine that the citizens of a country run by an amazing individual such as Kalka would tolerate one of the undead like that. Just thinking about the matter should have revolted him. Squire Byraha also. Could it be that she's been charmed by a spell or something? Yes. He might be using some spell with a wide area of effect that forces people to like him. Damn it, Remedios thought. She had not considered that possibility. I should tell Gustav about this. That said, it'll have to wait until we win this battle. Remedios looked behind her. There stood neat ranks of civilians holding spears and shields. Brave gentlemen. Regretfully, the Holy Kingdom is currently being trampled by demi-humans, but you must accept it. Defeat the demi-humans and save the innocent civilians, your friends and family, from their suffering. This is the first step towards our goal, which is to drive out these bastards here and take the Holy Kingdom back with our own hands. As Remedios shouted imposingly, anxious looks filled the faces of the militiamen. The filthy demi-humans are attacking this place. Gentlemen, raise your shields and thrust your spears. Become a wall that will not let the enemy past you. There's no need to be afraid. Other than their first wave, the only demi-humans you will have to deal with are the demi-humans fleeing from me. All you need to do is hold them for a while so that the paladins and I can take them down. That eased their tension a little. While being too relaxed was not a good thing, being too tense was even worse. Remedios mused that all the militiamen she could see were in an ideal frame of mind. You lot were trained all day yesterday. All you need to do now is show the fruits of that training. No need to be so tense. Remedios paused for a moment, and then shouted louder than before. First rank, shields up. The first row of the militiamen, who looked like they were encircling the gate, braced their shields. These were great shields which could completely conceal a human body, and their bottoms were lined with spikes that were the length of a finger. Shields. Dig in. The shield-wielding civilians slammed the spiked portions down with all their might. Thus, they produce a wall of steel in moments. Yesterday, these shield-bearers had vigorously practiced 3 drills. The first was to raise their great shields into the air and slam them back down, in order to drive the spikes deep into the ground. The second was not to falter, regardless of the pressure they were under. Second rank, shields up. While the shields they carried were roughly the same size as those of the first rank, theirs did not have spikes. Those shields would go over the heads of the first and the second ranks, like a lid on top of them. This way, they would protect against attacks which made it past the first rank. There were also paladins who could cast under divine flag, spaced evenly through the second rank, to protect them from the fear of being pushed by the enemy. Third rank spearmen, advance. Fourth rank spearmen, advance. The third and fourth ranks were composed of long spear users. Their long spears would protrude from between the shield teams, the butts firmly planted in the ground to stop the enemy's advance. The third rank and the fourth rank's spears were slightly different from each other in that the fourth ranks were slightly longer. Normally they ought to have had several more ranks of spearmen to form a spear wall. But since they were lacking in numbers, their aim was to overlap killing zones to prevent the enemy from breaking through. It was a perfect formation. However, it had a flaw. While this formation did very well against warriors, it was very weak against demi-humans with special abilities or magic casters. It was true that the shield wall could block spells like Fireball, and greatly minimize the damage done. However, spells like Lightning, that had a piercing, line-shaped area of effect would pierce straight through them and out the rear. One could not say the demi-humans did not have similar special abilities. They knew this, but they had taught them to take that formation anyway because no other formation was effective in these circumstances. Very good. Then let's begin. Open the gate. The portcullis began to rise as Remedios shouted. The advancing demi-humans were shaken, and their movements slowed down. The defenders were opening the gate of their own accord. Optimists might think it was a surrender, but realists would consider it a trap. Remedios laughed. You filthy demi-humans. I'll skin you and wipe my ass with your hides. After being taunted by a feeble human, the frustrated demi-humans broke into a charge. Remedios turned and ran. She planted both hands on the militiamen's shields and vaulted over them. The demi-humans continued their charge, several of them falling down as they approached the gate. Large quantities of oil had been poured there, and only two outcomes awaited those who fell during the charge. Either they would pull down those behind them, or they would be trampled flat instead. Unfortunately, the big-framed demi-humans like the ogres did not fall, and they made it into the city. The horse-like demi-humans slipped and fell, which slowed them down. A large demi-human's charge ought to be on par with a collision from a warhorse. However, if they could not follow through with it, then all bets were off. The ogres continued charging even though their pacing was messed up. They swung their large mauls back and forth, but the spears were longer in comparison, and they impaled several ogres who had failed to properly judge the distance. Unfortunately, the ogres were not fragile enough to be killed by that. Now, throw them. In accordance with Remedios' instructions, firebombs flew over the heads of the militiamen, and the sounds of pottery smashing could be heard near the gate as an inferno sprang up. The demi-humans around the gate were surrounded by a great fire. The demi-humans should have predicted something like this, but Remedios was certain that the fires were far beyond what they had expected. That was because both the oil on the ground and the oil on their bodies had ignited at once. The ogres facing the shield bearers began to falter. It was only to be expected, considering there was a blazing fire behind them. While they had thicker skin than a human being, that did not mean they could not be burned. Wails and cries rose from the vicinity of the gate. However, not many of them had lost the capacity to fight despite being enveloped by a fire of that intensity. One had to acknowledge the great vitality of demi-humans. Those demi-humans only had two options. They could advance or retreat. Black smoke blocked their lines of sight. Thus, they were robbed of all other options. While many demi-humans could see in the dark, that ability did not allow them to see through smoke. Nobody could act calmly while they could not see, were in anguish from the smoke, and when they were being burned by the flames. Retreating was very difficult given the circumstances. That was because others were following closely behind them in order to storm the city. In fact, the demi-humans outside the gate were hesitating due to the fire, but the ones inside could not know that, given that smoke obscured everything. Therefore, the demi-humans chose to advance. That was exactly as Remedios had predicted. The demi-humans attempted an assault, banking on their powerful bodies to carry the day. However, the shield-bearers' third drill consisted of maintain their shield wall even when surrounded by billowing black smoke. Spearman. Pull. The spears retreated as one. Spearman. Thrust. And they thrust out in unison. The demi-humans gave voice to savage howls, thinking only of getting out of the smoke, and it was under these circumstances, where defense and evasion were very difficult, that they ran into the spear line. However, a commoner's strength would be hard-pressed to impale a demi-human's body. This was particularly true of the hand-picked demi-humans who were intended to break through the gate in a frontal assault. However, that was no problem. Remedios did not think that they would go down in a single attack. As long as the shield-bearers were in place, the spearmen could attack over and over again. Pull, thrust. As she repeated the order, Remedios jumped over the shields in the opposite of her previous actions and cut down the demi-humans where the spears could not reach. Black smoke filled her eyes and throat, but she did not have the time to worry about that. There were very few demi-humans who had made it through the oil and the portcullis, about 50 at most. First she would kill them all and weaken the enemy's willingness to fight. Since they were part of the vanguard, they must have surely been highly motivated elite troops. Wiping him out would be more effective than killing mooks. Remedios' breathing was calm and unhurried as she killed one enemy after the other. Large demi-humans like Kogers could not bring their full abilities to bear in a pitched melee. The holy sword roamed everywhere without restraint. Eventually, the shapes of the demi-humans vanished from her tear-stained vision. However, she could still hear a large force of demi-humans on the other side of the smoke. They might have been in the middle of reforming their lines. As Remedios slowly backed away, the silhouettes of several demi-humans came into view. "Captain, come back here," her subordinate paladin shouted to her as he cast under divine flag. However, Remedios did not retreat. Her instincts were telling her something. As the smoke thinned, she could sense 3 demi-humans slowly approaching her, and shortly after that, her hunch was proved right. One of them was a warrior with the upper body of a beast and the lower body of a carnivore. One of them was a 4-armed demi-human woman. And the last was a simian demi-human who was festooned in golden accessories. Remedios had originally planned to kill tens of thousands of demi-humans by herself here, and she was very confident of doing so. However, she now sensed that fighting these 3 demi-humans at once was extremely dangerous. There were only 3 of them. While she could not make them out due to the smoke, she could tell they were brimming with confidence, given their unhurried pace. Even their fellow demi-humans seemed to have handed their task over to those 3, unwilling to come any closer. "They strong. I don't know if I can beat them even if it's a one-on-one fight. Or can I? I've got no chance if it's 3-on-1. Remedios' instincts screamed at her to flee rather than take these 3 on at the same time. But how should she escape? She had no idea. In contrast, if she beat those demi-humans, it would amount to a flawless victory for this theater of combat. Remedios gripped her holy sword tightly, and spoke without looking back. "Paladin Sabacus, Paladin Esteban." Both of them replied with the "yes," and, from the sounds they made, she judged that they had come to her side. "Can you pin 2 of them down until I kill one of them?" The 2 of them replied in unison. "Leave it to us." Remedios' instincts told her that she was being unreasonable. They might be able to buy a few minutes for starters. But how about sending more people to take the demi-humans on? No. Remedios shook her head. Her opponents were a mere 3 people, who had entered the fray by themselves. Clearly, they were confident in their own abilities and wanted to show off their strength. Enemies like those would surely accept a one-on-one challenge. Such was the arrogance of the mighty. In addition, such arrogant beings typically took pleasure in making the weak suffer. They would take the extra time to torment their victims even if they could have finished them off in a matter of seconds. With that faint hope in mind, she decided on a 3-on-3. Paladins. If the two who stepped up are defeated, continue fighting them one-on-one. The order goes: Sabacus, Esteban, Franco, and Galban. They were abandoning their advantage in numbers to buy time. Simply put, she was ordering everyone to kill themselves. However, the paladins did not hesitate for a moment when they received those orders. This was what it meant to be a paladin. This was what it meant to embody justice. This is what it means to sacrifice yourself for others. This was probably the last time they would be seen alive and unscathed. Even so, Remedios did not take her eyes from the three demi-humans for even a moment. She did not want to miss any chances to glean information from them. I don't have a clear picture of what's going on, but the first two demi-humans look like skilled fighters. Perhaps that ape-like demi-human is a monk. That 4 arms looks like a magic caster. Or is it something else? There was nothing to fear when dueling demi-humans who relied on brute strength alone, but demi-humans who had been trained were truly frightening. If they had received warrior training, then they could stack their training and their natural physical abilities to become exceptional individuals who could surpass even veteran warriors of the Holy Kingdom. In truth, the opponent who had given Remedios her hardest fight, Jaldaria aside, was such an entity. She recalled the blow that had stabbed her through her abdomen. That was why she paid attention when fighting demi-humans and heed the warnings of her instincts. On top of that, spellcasting demi-humans are the most troublesome to deal with. It'll be bad if they can fly through the air. While Remedios could use her armor's abilities to fly for short periods of time, she would not have her full range of movement while in flight. Ascending, descending, and turning were all very exhausting, and she would not be able to use her usual fighting style. If her opponent could cast fly, she might never be able to reach them with her attacks. While she possessed martial arts which allowed her to make ranged sword attacks, it would be difficult to win quickly when one took into account the fact that their effectiveness was a great deal lower. The 3 demi-humans entered through the gate, and then stopped. To think we'd have to join forces for a puny human. She could not make the 3 demi-humans out clearly through the smoke, but their relaxed tone had reached her. The hand gripping the holy sword beaded with sweat, and a bitter taste spread over her tongue, something that only happened when danger drew close. She could keenly feel her opponent's approach. The beast and the ape were definitely among the best of the best. While she was not sure about the 4-armed one, the fact that she could stand by their side meant that she was on their level. In other words, these 3 demi-humans were a match for Remedios. This smoke's getting in the way. What a pain in the ass. A strong wind blew the reaming smoke away with a whoosh. The demi-humans' forms were revealed. Standing at their head was a gigantic demi-human who wielded a battle-axe. Zostia. Paladin Esteban exclaimed. Remedios was somewhat baffled. Zostia, she thought. Was that the demi-human's name? Well, it makes sense that you'd know of me, the beastman said with an evil grin on his face. In that case, I'll spare you on account of your learning, so that more people will hear of my strength. Vija dono. Jaldari-sama will get angry if you take matters into your own hands like that. At the very least, have him drop his weapon and take him prisoner. The entity addressing the Zostia was the ape-like demi-human. Thoroughly confused, Remedios turned to the people around her, a question mark floating above her head. Zostia. Vija. Vija Zostia. Zostia Vija. While she was simply asking the names of the opposition, Vija did not realize that, and so he laughed in delight. Kuha. You're calling me that because you've concluded that I'm the leader of our race. You humans have good taste. She's just being polite, Vija Dono, the four-armed demi-human behind and to the left of Vija said in a mocking tone. That's right, it's just a courtesy, Vija. It was only then that Remedios realized she had made a mistake about his species name. Right after that, the demi-human called Vija twisted his face in displeasure. And I even asked Jalda-sama for permission to spare anyone who pleased me. Don't regret it. Who's going to regret it? You can regret fighting us in the afterlife. Hehehe, what a spirited young lady you are. You are a young lady, right? I'm not good with the ages of other species. It doesn't matter, that ought to be it. The demi-humans were probably being very serious. This was simply the difference between their species. Now then, human girl, I shall introduce ourselves. I am Halisha Ankara. This is Vija Legendara, who needs no introduction. And last of all is Nasreen but Kurudono. Those names. Aren't they the White Elder and Ice Flame Lightning? Paladin Sabacus exclaimed. Ku. Even the humans know our names. The fledgling, on the other hand. Human. Do I not have a title like that? I've never heard of the name Vija Legendara. However, there's an axe-wielding Zostia like you who's quite famous. It's the Demon Claw, Vaju Sandinara. That was my old man, Vija snorted. I'm the heir to the title of Demon Claw, Vija Lahandala. I'll make sure you think of my name when you hear the words Demon Claw. Hehehe. We'll leave the human general to you then, Vija Dono. So be it. It's hard enough that you've been forced to come right up to your opponents instead of using spells from a distance. Frankly speaking, I was planning to fight them all by myself. Hehehe. We were ordered to work together, you know. So you're having trouble, because you're getting on in years? TCH. The four-armed demi-human, Nasreen, who had clicked her tongue turned and gave Vija a scary look. In truth, it felt like they might start killing each other at any moment if they were left unchecked. Now then, I really am fine doing this by myself. Vija stared at Remedios. But let's hear your name before that. While it's a pain to have to listen to some mook name themselves, that sword of yours looks pretty good. Remedios Custodio. Vija and Halisha's expressions changed, but in different ways. Vija was smiling with bloodlust at the thought of meeting a strong foe, while Halisha was surprised. Nasreen, on the other hand, remained unmoved. So you're the one, huh? You're Remedios Custodio? They say you're the strongest paladin in this country. Excellent. If I kill you, I'll become famous. I'll be the Zostia who defeated the strongest paladin in the Holy Kingdom. The new successor to the title of Demon Claw. HMPH. In that case, that must be the Holy Sword, right? Say, Vija Dono, how about letting me face her instead? I'll have my people sing your praises if you let me take your place. Both demi-humans reacted immediately to Nasreen's words. Hehehe. So you're planning to hand it over and then ask Jaldari for a child? HMPH, we've decided that I'll deal with her. There's no need for you to do anything. Begging to be bred by a demon. You make me sick. Remedios could not help blurting out what she really thought after hearing that exchange, and Nasreen turned to give Remedios an irritated look. So you don't even understand what it means to bear the child of the Supreme Ruler. Humans truly are moronic creatures. Even Jaldari-sama would lavish care on the species of his offspring, no. When you think about it, there's a lot of advantages to being a woman, huh? Oh yes. And if the father's excellent blood could be passed down, the child that's born might come close to, no. Vija puffed up her chest. Might even be able to bear children that surpass their father, though you could consider me an exception too. These three demi-humans did not act like they were feeling threatened despite being on the battlefield. Remedios began to boil with anger as she watched them chatter idly. How dare you demi-humans come here and spout nonsense? There's no use thinking about a future you won't have. I'll crush your stupid dreams here. No, not just you, I mean all of you. Hee. Ooh, I'm so scared. While Halisha looked like he was flailing his arms and legs around in panic, he was not actually afraid. That was because he was confident of victory even against an opponent like Remedios. It only served to displease Remedios even further. Remedios shouted an order to the paladins, loud enough for the demi-humans to hear. Listen up. This is a duel. I'll fight Vija. As for you, I'll take him on, Sabacus said as he pointed to Halisha. In that case, I'll take that one on, Esteban said as he walked in front of Nasreen. Oya, I'm not a warrior so I'm not too sure, but they're pretty weak, aren't they? Hee. Who knows? Best not to be careless, Nasreen don't know. Remedios picked up Vija snorting at her, and she roared. Here I come. Quote, he must have sensed that those paladins were weak. No good would come of letting him mention it. The first strike was key. The militiamen were watching her from behind with bated breath. Not only would it wipe away their unease, it would also let her opponent know that he was facing a worthy opponent. For these reasons, she had to make an unreserved blow with all of her might. Remedios hacked down on Vija, holding the holy sword in one hand. In response, Vija raised his massive battle-axe to intercept her blow. Both sides collided, and the very air shuddered. She could hear shouts from the militiamen behind her. There was no time to slowly determine if they were cheers or cries of panic. Her full power strike had been answered by a counter-attack of equal force. The weapons of both sides were undamaged from that exchange of evenly matched blows. If someone had brought a mundane weapon to this intense clash, it would probably have been chipped or bent. In other words, Vija was also wielding an enchanted weapon. Nu. Remedios' next swing grazed Vija's upper body, sending forth a spray of blood. However, the battle-axe struck Remedios' chest at the same time. While her enchanted armor turned the battle-axe's keen blade, the impact knocked the wind out of her, and it became hard to breathe. In contrast to Remedios, who had been knocked back by the blow, Vija roared and stepped forward, bringing his battle-axe down on her. She did not have enough oxygen to counterattack. Remedios raised her holy sword high and gracefully deflected the battle-axe's force. That hair-raising strike missed her by a few millimeters and slammed into the ground. So powerful was the hit that for a moment it felt like she was floating. Remedios turned to face Vija, now defenseless because his battle-axe was buried in the ground, and lunged in with her holy sword. Strong strike. Fortress. Having judged that he did not have the time to extricate a heavy weapon like his battle-axe, Vija took one hand off its hilt and used it as a shield. Vija's right arm spurted fresh blood. However, the holy sword did not reach Vija's face. There were two reasons for that. The first was because he had used a defensive martial art. The other was because Remedios' arm was numb and could not exert its full strength. In that case, she would simply force the holy sword that had already penetrated deeper in, but then the intense pain racing up from Remedios' leg froze her briefly in place. The source of the pain was Vija's lower body. The forelimbs of his bestial body had swept across Remedios' legs. Her greaves protected her from most of his razor-sharp claws, but one of them had still managed to slice her leg apart. At that moment, the battle-axe was pulled free and rose up. Remedios took a step towards Vija to keep the battle-axe from moving. Just moving her leg filled her with agony. Strong strike. Strong claw. As the holy sword stabbed in, Vijay deftly deflected it with his battle axe. In response, Remedios redirected the holy sword as it bounced away and guided it into a slash over the strengthened animal forelimb. If Vijay backed off, Remedios would advance to close the distance between them. They went back and forth several times, both sides using martial arts. While neither side had sustained any mortal wounds, each round they fought sent blood splashing all around. Remedios was certain that she had her opponent on the defensive. If this keeps up, I'll win. Delight boiled up in her heart. If she could defeat these three powerful demi-humans, she could protect the people here. That way, they would regain their trust in the Holy Kingdom. There's no need for that undead being to show up. Simply put, the difference between warriors and paladins was that warriors were offensive frontliners while paladins were defensive frontliners. While it was hard to express in figures, one could say that a warrior's attack rating was 11 and his defense was 9, while a paladin's attack was 8 and his defense was 11. Needless to say, paladins could cast spells, but warriors could learn all sorts of martial arts, so it was impossible to make a simple comparison. Still, this was the easiest way to explain the situation to someone who knew nothing. If the question was who would be better against a magic caster, the answer would be a paladin. Thanks to the protection of the gods, they boasted superior magic resistance compared to warriors. Therefore, if Nasreen had been a magic caster on the same level as Remedios, she would not have been much of a threat. Next was Halisha, who was very likely to be a monk type given his war gear and movements. Monks had the advantage against magic casters or thieves, but the reverse was true against paladins. For that reason, that monkey was not a frightening foe either. Therefore, if I can beat this Vijay, chances are high that I can slaughter all three of them. Between fighting Vijay after being worn down by previous fighting, and fighting Vijay while unhurt, the latter option promised better odds for her. Remedios had challenged Vijay based on that decision. There should not have been anything wrong with that decision. However, she had miscalculated. My, dead already? He. Same here. Because the paladins fighting the other two were far too weak. What? Had she overestimated those two paladins, or underestimated the strength of those two demi-humans? Or was it both? You're insulting me by taking your eyes off me. Vijay swung furiously at Remedios. Gawa. While she had barely managed to stop that strike, she had still been forced a short distance away. The tide of battle had turned in an instant. Remedios, was it? You do know that I am the great Vijay, a being of great power whose name will resound throughout the world. If you don't put all of your body and soul into it, you'll die in seconds, you know. Remedios bit her lip as she heard the sounds of the others fighting. He. I wonder if this paladin is strong enough. He's no different from the previous one. Well, I can't really tell since I'm not a warrior. I am Paladin Franco. And I am Paladin Galban. I will be your opponent. Several seconds after they had spoken, she once again heard the sound of armored men collapsing. Paladin Franco was a good man. While he was not a very strong paladin, he placed a lot of emphasis on getting along with others and he was well liked as a result. In truth, he had been assigned here because Gustav trusted him. Remedios knew his character, and so she had given him the task of organizing the militiamen here. She had heard that Paladin Galban was a newlywed. However, his wife was currently locked up somewhere. He had extinguished his desire to save her and had come to assist Remedios instead, in order to help more people. These two people, who were too young to die, had been killed. Distracted again, Vijay roared, and dealt her a blow that was even more ferocious than the previous one. Remedios flung herself towards Vija, taking the blow on her sword arm, and then she slid her blade, but Vija nimbly evaded it. What's this, some kind of bluff? Or did your body remember that movement because of all your trying? Vija growled. He was not wary of a worthy foe, but delighted. Hey, fledgling, we're done here, but you've been at it a long time. How about it? Need help? You must be kidding. My legend will be tainted if I need your help to kill her. Many people will speak of this if I beat her in a one-on-one. Vija Dono's words are correct. How about this, Nasreen Dono? We'll destroy the humans' shields, and then, as if I'd let you. While she was still confronting Vija, Remedios took her eyes off him and turned to look at the defenseless pair. However, you bitch. I told you already, I'm your opponent. Vija did not allow her to do so. Her defense was full of holes, but he did not swing at her with his battle axe, instead launching a kick. Remedios took the blow and was sent flying into the shield wall with tremendous force. The shock of the impact threw her breathing into chaos for a moment. The militiaman cried out in fear. Keep your attention on me, human. Fight seriously. Vija's shout was followed closely by the sound of his footsteps. If he swung his long-handled battle axe, he would send the shield-wielding civilians flying, creating a gap in the formation big enough that recovery would be impossible. Even though Remedios had lost her balance, she still took a step forward, lunging at Vija, who stood in front of her. If possible, she would have liked to finish off Vija with her own abilities. That was because of the power that Remedios was holding in reserve to deal with the other two. It was a powerful move that the Holy Sword Sapphire possessed, which could only be used once a day. It was a strengthened version of a paladin's Holy Strike. It was the most powerful attack that a paladin wielding this sword could unleash. Her instincts told her that it would be best not to do so. However, if she did not immediately defeat Vija, the other two demi-humans would kill more people. I want to protect Kalka-sama's wish. She cried out without words, ignored her instincts as they screamed at her, and mentally sent a command to the Holy Sword. At the same time, she infused her Holy Strike into the blade and made her move. The Holy Sword glowed with divine radiance, and light extended out to twice the length of the actual blade. This light was apparently more dazzling the more evil a being was. In this state, avoiding or blocking this blow would be more difficult. The word, apparently, came to mind because it did not seem that bright to Remedios' eyes. Remedios raised her Holy Sword to the sky, and swung it down with all her might. Since Remedios had lost her bearings, predicting the course of the attack was child's play. Vija casually prepared to check the blow with his axe and then shove her back. However, following another wordless cry, Remedios pressed down on her Holy Sword while it was still locked with the battle axe, and continued forcing it down. She did not intend to have her sword strike its target through brute force. The reason for this was because the radiance on the sword followed the path of the blade as it traveled down, passing through the battle axe and entering Vija's body. This was the ultimate technique of the Holy Sword Sapphire. It was a holy wave that ignored defenses and armor. The sturdiest armor, scales, and hides meant nothing to it. Since it could even pass through magic weapons, it could not be stopped by weapons or shields, which made it an unavoidable trump card. Of course, if one did not choose to clash with the blow and was nimble enough to avoid it, they would not be hit by the wave of light. However, there was no way to avoid Remedios' flashing strike while one's eyes were dazzled by the light. As the wave of light blew past like the wind, the holy radiance on the blade vanished as well. However, Remedios' eyes went wide. She had clearly hit her target, but Vija did not look like he was in pain. What? That was a flashy move, but It hardly hurts at all. Is it just for show? Though I have to say, it did startle me. Remedios was shocked. This guy, he's not evil aligned. This technique was more effective the more evil one's foe was. In contrast, it did little damage to non-evil targets. It did practically nothing to good-aligned people. In other words, the fact that it had hurt Vija meant that while he was not good, he was certainly not evil either. He made the people suffer. He invaded our country. How can someone like that not be evil? He. Well, that was quite a spectacular light show, Vija Dono. Are you really unhurt? Halisha narrowed his eyes as he questioned Vija. It was so bright. It's still burning my eyes. Nasreen grumbled from the side. She had made a mistake. She should not have used that move on Vija after all. Vija tested his limbs and made sure his body was fine before shrugging. While he seemed defenseless, Remedios could not find any weaknesses in his defense no matter how hard she looked. A light show? Well, I'm not too sure what that was all about, but it's nothing much, right? Vija, I'm kind of surprised. To think you were unharmed by that attack. I might have underestimated you. Fuha. You get it at last. Ha. All right, human. You did well in making me look good. If you surrender, I'll kill you painlessly. How about that? Don't make those unfunny jokes. We haven't settled this yet. Remedios raised her sword and shouted at the three demi-humans. Remedios could still fight, like she had said. She placed a hand over her wounds and used her healing abilities. Her pain was carried away by the sensation of warmth. A lot of paladin techniques won't work on him since he's not evil. But since the two of them were dazzled by it, I'll save them for those two instead. All she had to do was fight Vija as a pure warrior. He. Well then, we'll leave her to you, Vija Dono. We'll be hunting the humans in the rear. What? You scumbags. All the paladins she had called up were dead. The militiamen could not possibly stop them. As if I'd let you have your way. Remedios backed off and repositioned so she could face the three demi-humans at once. It seems you're ready to take the three of us on at once, but Vija said he wanted to take care of this. He. Our aim is to wipe out the humans in the city as need, not to serve as your opponents. Nasreen Dono, may I count on you to wipe out that rabble in the back with your power? Ah yes. There were masses of magical power in three of Nasreen's four hands. One was ice, the other was fire, and the last was lightning. Damn it. Remedios ran toward the female demi-human. I told you just now. I'm your opponent. And blocked the battle axe swung at her with a roar, but she was flung far away. At this moment, Remedios realized that there was no way she could deal with Nasreen while fighting Vija at the same time. While she could have just jumped right to Nasreen's side, defending against Nasreen's attacks would have left her defenseless body exposed to Vija. What do you mean no way? I won't accept this. Not being able to do anything is just an excuse. The moans of the militiamen stirred up Remedios' emotions. These people had not fled in the face of terror because they believed in her. She could not show them a disgraceful side of herself. She would not abandon Kalka's ideals, to make a country where nobody would cry. Militiamen, everyone, fall back. As she gave the command, Remedios gathered her resolve. I won't die from taking a single hit. I'll rush that female demi-human while activating Fortress. Vija laughed as he watched Remedios break into a run. It would seem he had misunderstood something. Ho, it seems you've made up your mind. That's the way. Fight me with all you have. Give me a battle worthy of a legend. Showdown declaration. Huh? Vija roared, and there was a special power in that roar. Remedios' legs, which were supposed to carry her towards Nasreen, charged towards Vija like they had gone mad. Nor was it just her legs, her sword, her mind, her vision. She could not pull any of them from Vija. Fireball. A third-tier spell flew past Remedio's body and at the militiaman. Remedios could endure that spell, but it would be fatal to the militiaman. Wall of skeleton. The fireball collided with the grotesque-looking wall of bones that had sprung up in front of the militiaman and vanished. Someone exclaimed in surprise. Initially, it was because they had no idea what had just happened. However, it slowly changed. That was because they saw something descend lightly, like it was unaffected by gravity, and land on top of the frightening wall of skeletons. That person possessed none of the intense emotions of the battlefield, and spoke with a gentle tone that seemed completely out of place with his surroundings. While this is a common enough occurrence on the battlefield, I find it a little difficult to watch a 3-on-1 battle. You don't mind if I join in, do you? The owner of that voice was undead. Everyone in this city recognized him. He was the person who had originally refused to fight in order to recover his mana. He was the Saucer King Ainzul Gaon. Oh! An earth-shaking cheer came from the other side of the wall. Remedios tightly clenched her sword hand. What's that? Who is that? By the looks of it, I think it's an Elder Lich. So there's a type without skin. Still, does a mere Elder Lich have the power to stop my spells? Is it because of his robe? It does look quite impressive. Or no, is it because its summoner possesses great power? Remedios did not comprehend the demi-human's words at all. She heard the sounds, but she did not understand what they meant. That was because all her energy was focused on quelling the intense hatred welling up within her. She did not even notice that she was standing defenseless in front of Vija. Why did he show up? Why are they cheering for him? Why? For this filthy undead being. A corner of Remedio's mind was calm enough to note that it was a natural reaction to help someone in difficulty. However, it was overruled by her inability to forgive the civilians for cheering on the undead. The corpses of the paladins who had sacrificed themselves as shields to protect the people were clearly visible. You're not cheering for the people who fought as your shield, but for someone who showed up late. She was so angry that she wanted to rip her helmet off and scratch her head while rolling around on the ground. Remedios struggled to curb the anger in her heart, and she addressed the undead being on the wall. Why did you come here? The Saucer King's movements stopped, as though he had been frozen in place. The red flames in his empty eye sockets turned to Remedios. Why? I came to help you. I see. Why had he not come earlier? Was he waiting until the paladins had died? Did he plan to make a stylish entrance in front of the people? She wanted to shout that at him, but then I'll leave it to you. Quote. She did not phrase it as a request. She could not. And get rid of the wall. I said I'll leave it to you. She shouted without thinking. Remedios strove to quell her rising emotions. And tear down that wall. You can't. Certainly not. In an instant, the wall beneath the Saucer King's feet vanished. The Saucer King did not fall down, probably because he was using a fly spell. Remedios turned her back on Vija. She did not mind if he killed her from behind. That way she could laugh at the Saucer King for not protecting her. Having abandoned herself to despair, Remedios found it somewhat regretful that the demi-humans did not attack her as she trudged back in front of the militiaman. There was a hint of fear in the militiaman's eyes. Was the look on her face so horrible? We'll let the Saucer King handle this place. Let's go help where they need us more. After hearing Remedio's orders, the militiamen looked at each other, and they seemed confused. Are you disobeying orders? After Remedios glared at them, one of the militiamen quietly asked. No. But the Saucer King, by himself. The Saucer King is strong. Isn't that right? In that case, something like that won't be a problem for him. Let's go. Remedios led the militiamen to another battlefield. They repeatedly looked back at him as they left. Ains looked at the empty space where they had been and muttered to himself, that bitch, she actually dumped it all on me. This ridiculous state of events made Ains reveal his true nature. Normally, wouldn't we have a scene like, "Oh, let's fight together," or something? "Thanks for coming, we'll leave them all to you." Quote, at the very least she could have been polite about it. We could have gone back and forth several times about, "Will you be alright here?" and so on. And not even a single word of gratitude after being saved. What the hell, man? Frustration built in his heart. However, it did not reach the level of true anger, so it was not suppressed. It was like a tiny flame of indignation simmering inside him. It was as though how someone had messed up and forced him to work overtime, and the person in question had said that they had something on and just up and left. No. I would have been more angry. Like say, if I was going home to play YGGDRASIL. And the guild had plans already, and being late would cause problems for everyone. It happened before, and while everyone forgave me back then, thus fueled, the minuscule flames blazed up into an inferno, and then they were forcibly extinguished. While my anger's been suppressed, I'm still unhappy. That's the first time I've been treated so rudely. While she had shouted, "Shut up," at him before, the situation had been different back then. In the first place, they had agreed that Ains could sit this battle out, but Ains had still rushed over as reinforcements. Surely anyone who had an inkling of common sense would have taken a different tone when addressing him. Everyone Ains had met until now had been at least minimally polite. That was why Ains found it strange. After cooling his head and searching through his memories, Suzuki Satori recalled having met people like Remedios several times before. Still, none of it comforted him. Ains turned his still irate gaze on the three demi-humans. Granted, it was not entirely their fault either. Ains understood that he was simply taking it out on them. What should have happened was that Remedios' relationship meter with Ains should have maxed out when the latter saved her from danger. She should have apologized for treating Ains this way all this time, and then worked hard for Ains in all ways in the future. That was why Ains had been observing Remedios from the air with perfect unknowable, active all this time, and then stepped in to help her when she was in trouble. But in the end, things had turned out like this. He could not understand how they had ended up this way. If the department's quota was not met and it was close to the end of the month and someone stepped up to make up for the shortfall, surely everyone would be grateful to that person, right? Especially if that person had finished his own work long ago and had come back from his leave to help them. Ains had been observing the battlefield from above, and he had a firm grasp of the big picture. There were many more dangerous places than this. He was even aware that the girl who had glared at him all this time was in danger. Even so, he had chosen to come to this place because he wanted to sell a favor to the highest-ranking person he could, better to rule in hell than serve in heaven and all that, and he had judged that the captain of the Holy Kingdom's Paladin Corps was the highest-ranking person here. However, I really am annoyed. As he grumbled without thinking, Ains heard a piercing laugh. He. Looks like you've been left here. He. How sad, how sad. An elder lich. In other words, an individual that's powerful as a magic caster. Is there a need to be careful? I haven't seen that wall-making spell before, but it seems to be of a fairly high tier. HMPH. So it's still a magic caster, then. Don't really feel like fighting it. In the end, you need to beat a warrior if you want people to sing tales about you. The three demi-humans seemed to have recovered from the bizarre situation enough to banter with each other. Ains turned to look at them, and his eyes focused on the ape-like demi-human among them who seemed to have laughed just now. Does it matter? First we kill him, then. Shut up. Ains interrupted their conversation and cast a silent 8th tier spell, Death. The ape-like demi-human's smile was frozen on his face as he slowly collapsed. What? What did you? I told you to shut up, didn't I? Ains once again cast a silent, Death spell. The four-legged demi-human collapsed in the same way as just now. What happened? What's going on? The female demi-human who remained still did not understand what was going on, but it would seem she had already recognized who had done it. Was it you? You killed those two in an instant. Terror was deeply etched on her face. Her body was shaking hard. Yes. Ains carelessly cast a silent death on the female demi-human as well. She did not die. Ains's death had been resisted. In the moment he realized this, Ains's mind immediately switched gears, entering a mental state that could be considered a combat mode. Was it a defensive racial characteristic? A protective spell she had cast on herself? Had she resisted it normally? Had a magic item protected her? Or was it something else? While one could not completely rule out the possibility that it might have been a coincidence, surely she could not have resisted it under her own power. Ains had observed the three of them as they fought. While he did not think that he had the full measure of their abilities, Ains was certain that they could not resist the power of his magic in a direct contest. As Ains mulled over the reasons for this, he felt that it would be best to stay on his guard and let his opponent make a move. Perhaps he might discover something that could only be found here. He would like to see the trump card wielded by someone who could resist Ains's usual attack methods. Well, it doesn't matter what she did. What a waste of time. If I'd known, I would have left that woman alone and gone to help elsewhere. I was thinking that if I fought together with that woman, we could have put on a show of hard-fought triumph, so we would have spent a bit more time on the back and forth. A chatty undead being stood before her. What kind of undead creature is this? The undead couldn't possibly ally themselves with humans. Is it being controlled by a necromancer? Still, that power. While she had no idea what he had done, he had instantly killed two warriors who were on par with her. Could such a powerful undead being even be controlled? If his finger pointed to her, would she be the one to perish next? The only people she knew who could do this besides the demon emperor Jaldari would be the great demons who were his henchmen. That's impossible. Anyone who could control an undead creature who was on par with those mighty beings must be on the level of a god. How could such a necromancer exist? If this human nation had such a necromancer, how could the demi-human alliance have pressed their invasion so far? Should I run? Should I take the chance to flee while he's acting all relaxed? Or can I even escape? She did not possess any spells which were handy for escape. After all, she had never been in such danger before and had not felt the importance of learning such spells. In that case, the only way out is through. She used her battle cry to rouse her spirit, and began to cast spells with her trembling lips. There was a 4th tier arcane spell called Silver Lance. It was a physical type spell, but since it possessed silver properties, it was a tremendously damaging spell against enemies who were weak against silver. In addition, it also had a special effect known as piercing, which made it do more damage to unarmored opponents. However, it also had the drawback that its damage could be reduced by armor. Her trump card lay in altering this powerful spell to produce new, unique spells. There was the Burn Lance, which inflicted fire element damage. There was the Freeze Lance, which inflicted cold element damage. There was the Shock Lance, which inflicted lightning element damage. These 3 spells all did elemental damage. Sayama could not reduce their potency, and they still retained the deadly piercing ability. Of course, in keeping with their deadliness, those spells consumed far more mana than 4th tier spells. She activated 3 of these potent to her spells at once. She was simultaneously casting 3 spells, each one of which used a significant amount of mana. In addition, simultaneously casting spells was very dry in itself, and as the shock of using huge quantities of mana hit her, she felt light and floaty, as though she were about to pass out. Die. The 3 lances flew toward the undead being, and then vanished without a trace. She could not understand what had happened before her eyes. She could understand if it had taken damage, or shrugged it off. But this was like nothing had happened at all. The lancers had simply vanished. What? I gave you all that time and this is the best you can do? Is this the ace up your sleeve? I guess I didn't need to let you make the first move out of caution. Now then, there's not much time left, so hurry up and die. Maximize magic reality /